Hey folks, welcome. It is the Counter Clipping Show. We are on October 25th, 2021, and we have what I think will be a good show for us this week. So let's talk about, actually, we're, in the spirit of trying to improve the show every week, we've actually had some improvements in place for this week. One of them might come up if somebody subscribes tonight while we're broadcasting. The other is I have an actual super duper loose outline to work from, so that we can actually I can not forget half the stuff I wanted to talk about. So what are we drinking? We are drinking, courtesy of Dave Minery, who is a regular viewer and a friend, this bottle of Boulder American single malt peated whiskey. It is very good. It is better than the Stranahan's, which is also an American single malt. I like it a ton. It's really good. It's not heavily peated by my standards, which, my standards say heavily peated is like Lafroig. It's got very little nose. It is bottled at 46%. I do recommend putting a little bit of water into it to open up the nose. Otherwise, you're not going to smell anything except alcohol vapor. It has a huge palate, however, which I really like. It's very good. So we are clipping, as you could probably see, First to Fight. This is the Europa-Poland game. The Poles are clipped, the Soviets are clipped, the Lithuanians and Slovaks are clipped, so I just got to work on the Germans, which have 3 times as many counters as everybody else. So, because, for Europa reasons, right? It's like the entire 1939 German army is in that box. For why, I'm not sure, but it is. So you can do 1940 France stuff if you had the French 1940 army, which maybe that's out there. I don't even know. Anyway, so we got that happening. The channel of the week is George Hyotis. His channel is linked in the video description. Please do check him out. He does largely ASL content. So if you are interested in that, you should definitely check him out. Before we proceed, I would like to remind everybody, please, if you are not subscribed to the channel already, please do subscribe to the channel. It helps the channel and the YouTube metrics and the magical wizardry that happens behind the scenes at YouTube, and do like the video as well. So let's say hello to Missing Seattle E4 Airman Carl Creeder, Matt Taylor Strelnikoff, Rick Cox, Wade Moore, Nathan Landrum, Dale Brady, Daniel Berger, Ye Old Geezer Gamer, Jason W., Iggy Critical, Rich L. Camp, Ken X, Henry Sikorsky, John Longshore is in the house, Richard D. Fortuna, David Imperato, Jeff Anderson, Jeff Beeler, Patrick from Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials, Greg Grant, Manders, Joe Perez, Kyle Reese, Doug Blaert, Peter Bergs, The Command Tent, Brent McCabe, William Bird, The Joy of Wargaming, Brian Gash, Tony from Tony's Board Life, Fucko is here, and Peter Bergs so far. Pretty good turnout so far. This is pretty good. I don't know if this is something I can get in Ohio or not. It's plausible that I can, but I haven't actually investigated. I have not seen the Stranahan's in Ohio, I can tell you that. At least not the blue label. The yellow label may be. The yellow label's a little easier to get. There's a name for these things. Charles the Toro, welcome back. There's a name for the yellow label. I forget what it is. And a name for the blue label. I call them the yellow label and the blue label. So let's talk, first of all, let's do in a structured way, let's talk about what I am playing, which right now is, as I've mentioned, Europa. We did wrap up our game of NATO from Compass, which we very much enjoyed. We will almost certainly be playing that again at some point. And since we have that, I have, let me get rid of this and pull it up. I have pictures. So let me explain what we're doing here. So this is not War in the Desert. We decided, in my absence from the 1 week that I missed, because I was getting needles poked in my face, that we were going to do Balkan Front alongside War in the Desert. Balkan Front starts in, I think, October of 1940. The War in the Desert campaign that we were starting with starts with Operation Compass, which is, and we'll get to that in a minute, which is December of 1940. So this is the initial positions on the Albanian border with the Greeks. Most of the units that you can see, what looks like white units, those are Italians. The orange guys are the Greeks, and the sort of light grays are the Albanians. They're not very useful. So let's... here's a little bit of a wider shot. This is after the initial breakthrough by the Italians. Unfortunately, the terrain is such that they don't really have the ability to exploit that. Here's another little shot where they start forcing their way down the coast, which is pretty much where we're currently at with that campaign. Here is the desert stuff. This is immediately prior to Operation Compass, where the Italians took it in the face pretty bad. We've got a couple more Operation Compass shots here, a couple more shots of the front in Greece. Here you can see a couple of Italian stacks have been isolated, which is bad news for the Italians. That doesn't eliminate them or anything, but which is, an interesting scale artifact, considering that in the course of probably 3 or 4 turns, those guys would be toast in OCS. They can hang on for a couple of months in Europa. Maybe not in this case. Here's my storage solution for Baltic I keep saying that Balkan Front, which I'm now rethinking, but it looks real nice. Pictures of this and the files are posted on Board Game Geek, and yes, they're up already. Let me say hello to Bam, a retired grunt, Scott Blanchett, Pete Hopshed, New Zealand, 6 Actual, and Mike Anthony, if I haven't said hello to you already. The Urals showed up. I got a copy of this, I think off one of the Facebook Marketplace groups. This was like $20. I would have paid more than that, but $20 is certainly a good price. Do not, if you're in the market for this stuff, go pay $100 for one of these. It is not worth that. It's easy to find with boxes in bad condition, but there's no counters, so you don't have to worry about anything getting punched. There's some booklets and some maps, and that's it. And it's totally useless to me right now because I don't have Scorched Earth. But, $20, what can I say? These are pictures from the In Progress. They are literally playing right now as I am at home streaming to you. The OCS Top Secret Playtest event here in Columbus, Ohio. I was asked not to talk about this. I nevertheless did mention it a couple times anyway as the Top Secret OCS event, and it is happening right now. We don't know if there will be another one or not, but expect me to start talking about things like Winterfest and Buckeye Game Fest as those things approach. So this is stuff from Cross-Channel Attack. That is the OCS Normandy game. They have 3 of these on the table at the Top Secret OCS Playtest event, which has about 15, 18 people, something like that there. Cross-Channel Attack will be a 6-mapper, but you can do a 4-map layout, which is just the maps along the coast, and that's what you'll actually see here. At no point did anybody set up the 2 southern maps. So this is one setup of the 3. This was, I think, the one. Yeah, this is the one that got reset twice because they made mistakes. But you'll notice that they have a blowout map of the Normandy beachhead area. That is an absolute necessity with this game. Curtis Bear, the OCS honcho, assures me that it will in fact launch with a blown up area map to cover the beachhead, possibly down as far south as Falaise. Which I think it will cover the percentage we're talking about. It helped a lot, as you'll see in the coming pictures here. This is the second setup, which they did not reset, despite making issues on the first turn as well. This is, before they got to the pieces set up, this is the Crimea module that is also in playtest. This is the Luzon module, which is going to be quite small, quite manageable, and ideal, it is said, OCS introductory package, which, if I might have a picture of this, and if everything proceeds according to plan, we'll have more pictures from this event next week, and possibly an interview, we'll see. The idea is to package this with various informative training articles and things like that, but I think they haven't quite decided how they're going to package this yet, so we'll see. This is the Normandy Beachhead Breakout. This is turn 2, I believe, and this is on the expanded map. Now you'll see how this looks on the non-expanded map. Here's the book that the game gets its name from. This is from the U.S. Army Green Books, the first of the U.S. Army Green Books on the war in Europe, which covers, of course, the D-Day invasion. Pretty much the whole book is D-Day invasion, and I have read this. It's a bit of a slog to read. This is the lone non-OCS game, which is being played by the locals. It is the Cedar Creek from the Death Valley set from GMT and the Great Battles of the American Civil War. And Stigler is not here for me to brag this to. This is a shot of the extra maps at the time. They've been set up now as the third game, so you can see a little bit more action around what this Normandy map looks like. The full setup does include the German positions and the big guns and stuff on the Channel Islands, which is pretty cool. So Chip Saltzman, who is the developer for this, and I'm not sure what his official title is posting stuff to the OCS group for this. And he's got more pictures than I do because he's been there the whole time. I was just there on Saturday. Here we can see the Carentan, Utah Beach, Omaha Beach area. Here we can see the beachhead. This is before the Germans get set up. And let me tell you, getting in here even with tweezers really kind of sucked. This is why the finished game, whenever it's ready, and it's not that, it's getting there, but it's not that close. Don't count on seeing it. Don't wager actual money that it will be out in 2022. I think that's possible, but there's no official word on that, of course. So, and we'll see if Pete Bartlett drops by to give us official word. His last official word said that he hadn't heard anything. So there's hope that one of these things will be out by then, but we'll see. So yeah, density is off the hook on this. And, this is despite the fact that there's a penalty for overstacking or for stacking near the stacking limit in OCS. I got to play 2 turns as the Germans in this position, and you can believe I was barraging those big stacks in the back, even though I could not spot against them, which is, I think, 3 shifts down. But even so, they're a couple of shifts up, so... this is, I forget exactly when this happened. This is in about turn 1. You can see there is actually a setup with a gap in the German line that you can see sort of right there where the 2 army groups come together. It's actually just 1 army group at this point. And this, by the way, is the Cobra scenario, right? This starts, I think, on June 26th or 25th. So you're not starting with there are landings in the game. They are in the campaign, but you don't have to start with that. You can start with Cobra. This showed up. The Damned Die Hard got it for a good price on eBay. Here's another one of these. This is the shot I took tonight while I was picking up this other thing. Here's the Cedar Creek game in progress. Here's a playtest game of Luzon in progress. Here's what showed up today. I went and picked that up today. So that is all the pictures that I have. But we have some news items to talk about before we get to the topic and I get back to counter clipping and all that stuff. Multiman Publishing will not be having a Black Friday sale because they expect Hollow Legions to be shipping it around that time, and they don't believe that they can handle both. So, this weekend, starting at midnight on Friday, this Friday, they will have a Halloween sale instead. So keep your eyes on the Multiman Publishing website. Expect stuff on huge discounts. I personally have already spent more than enough money, so I'm going to be extremely conservative, but I will also probably order something. So we will see exactly how that works out. We also have a GMT update, so let's go through this very briefly. So here there are, and I'm not going to read through the whole thing, right? I'm going to talk about more of the production prospectus more than anything else. So if you want to read the recap of Weekend at the Warehouse and all that stuff, please do that. There's tons of pictures on social media as well. Just a Guard posted some video from it. It all looked great. It looked like a very fun event. I am glad that that people had fun on it. So they have begun shipping the first 6 games that have arrived from the printer. These are the things that showed up off the boat. 3 new P500s, Baltic Empires, Bear Trap, and Volume 4 of the Last 100 Yards series. Let's get some water because I'm talking really fast, and I've had a lot of caffeine. So, the box back for Baltic Approaches. This is the Red Storm expansion. I'm probably going to buy this. Here's a GMT1 update. This is the GMT solo project for a variety of different games. Once again, playtesters help wanted. Once again, counter trays are back in stock. That also applies to the 2 and 3 inch blank boxes. There's an interview here with Paul Hellyer, designer of Prime Minister, which actually does look neat. And then there's some typical housekeeping. New P500 editions, Baltic Empire's Bear Trap, and The Last 100 Yards, The Russian Front, as we already mentioned, and second printings of Atlantic Chase and Chariots of Fire. If you are in the market for very ancient world, as in ancient Mesopotamia, Daniel Berger, I'm guessing that Ericor will not be on sale. The price for Ericor is really pretty good, the pre-order price. So if you're tempted by BCS, Ericor is a very good place to go in. Don't count on Burma getting reprinted, though, I gotta tell you. Hethwolf, welcome back to the channel. And David Thompson, welcome back. And Jeffrey Wesovich. The weather here in Central Ohio, by the way, is crap today, and has been for the last couple of days. Anyway, Great Battles of History, Chariots of Fire, ancient Mesopotamian stuff, including Troy, the Battle of Troy with the heroes from the Iliad and all that stuff, special rules for that. It's really quite neat. Welcome back to the channel, Ronald Nicholson. And for those who didn't get in on Atlantic Chase, which sold out very quickly, now's your chance to pre-order a second printing, just because I'm curious what do the pre-order numbers look like. 127 already. That's pretty good. This released a couple days ago. Okay, so we're not going to go through this stuff. Baltic Empires, the Northern Wars of 1558 to 1721. That's a huge period. If you're interested in this, there's not a lot on it yet, but P500 price of 65, MSRP of 95. Does it say whether it's going to have what's it going to have? 5 asymmetric factions, mounted map, 3 counter sheets, a bunch of playing cards, wooden pieces, all that stuff. Bear Trap. This is the Soviet-Afghan War, 1979 to 1989. This apparently is based on the Sekigahara system, which is a very well-regarded system. You may have seen the unboxing video of, which you can't see because I'm in mini mode here. Granada, which is up behind me, that also uses the Sekigahara system. Don't be surprised if other adaptations use this system, because it's very well liked. It is a hex-based map, unlike Sekigahara. If you're interested in this topic, this is something to maybe think about. And the third one was Last 100 Yards. I'll assume at some point I got to check this thing out. But I don't have any of the volumes in the series as of this moment. Bob Kovalchik asks about Empire of the Sun. We'll see where that is on the list down here. I have gone through this already, of course. New P500s, a new bot project for a coin series game. So I'm guessing that this is going to be the card-based bot system that was originally introduced with Gandhi. There is a card-based bot system coming out for Fire in the Lake, which I just ordered, and that's coming pretty soon. So this is probably another one of those. New content for Commands and Collars. That's a big shock. Napoleonic-themed game from Ted Racer. This is almost certainly I, Napoleon. That person is very annoying. This is almost certainly I, Napoleon, which Ted describes as an RPG. I'm very curious to see it. Another Levian campaign series game. This could be one of about 3 or 4 different things that I've seen pictures of over the last couple of weeks. New operational level World War II game from Mark Simonich. This might be the add-on to Salerno 43. That is an insta-buy from me if that is the case. So upcoming, I will point out, next month, November 12th through the 14th is the San Diego Historical Games online event. So check that out. It's at sdhistcon.com, I believe. It's been a very good event, very well attended. A lot of high-profile people in the hobby show up at this thing, and you can, hobnob with Mark Herman and Volko and a bunch of other people. So, new stuff from Vevictus. This looks like the same new stuff from Vevictus that we've seen. Let's see here. We're going to get down to... There's a bunch of Inside GMT. Again, if you're interested in any of this stuff, check the article out. Okay, charging and shipping. Current charges and shipments. Charged on October 8th, and they are starting to ship them as of when this posted, which was... like Friday, I think. Absolute War MBT second printing, Normandy 44 third printing. If you don't have Normandy 44, highly recommended by me. A lot of people like MBT too, but that's not something I have or have any experience with. Tank Duel Expansion number 1 and Tank Pack number 1, Wing Leader Supremacy expansions for very well regarded and popular games. GMT also plans to charge for these 6 games on November 1st. 1848 Australia, which is a rail game. Panzer, and 3 different Panzer expansions, plus Wing Leader Supremacy 2nd Edition update kit. So tons of that stuff. I believe that means that they probably have this stuff on our shores at this moment. So you'll see the different breakdown when we get to the rest of the production schedule. So this is the stuff that's at the warehouse. This is the stuff that's at the warehouse and shipping in a couple of weeks. This stuff is at the printer and loading to ship, okay? This is Almoravid, which is the next Levian campaign game from Volko. This is about the Reconquista. You may know, if you watched the Granada video, that this is a topic that I am interested in, so I'm going to pick that up. Battle Line, 11th printing. If you don't already have Battle Line, I'm not sure what's up with that. CNC Ancients, 1,000th printing, Conquest and Consequence, which is the Pacific version of Triumph and Tragedy. Haven't played it, but Triumph and Tragedy is great fun. New printing of that is coming as well. Red Flag Over Paris, that's Fred Serval's game about the Paris Commune. That actually looks really interesting. Last 100 Yards, Volume 3. Apparently these are coming out about monthly now. The Solomon Islands, so you can get your Pacific Island War stuff going on. And Twilight Struggle Deluxe 8th printing. I don't know what's deluxe about it as opposed to the last 10 printings. At the printer, no ship date yet, and this is where so far on this prospectus, I am being charged for nothing yet, right? That's great. However, when the next boat arrives, I am going to be in bad shape because Barbarossa Army Group Center, Into the Woods, Pacific War, Salerno 43, and Vietnam 1965 to 75 are all pre-orders of mine. So I might get, I'm absolutely cornholed when that bill comes due. Spud RPH asks about the appeal of the 18XX games. You know, every time somebody asks, hey, let's play a rail game, I'm like, oh, I don't like rail games. And then I end up playing it anyway and having fun. So I can't explain the appeal of 18XX games, but every time I've played one, I have enjoyed it. So, and I do have a couple of them. And at some point, I might even do a review, but... John Longshore says a cargo ship in California caught on fire and 40 containers fell into the ocean. Boy, that's bad news. But there's so many of them that the chances of any of those getting hit, any of our stuff getting hit on that is is pretty small. John Longshore jokes that Rock of the Marne might be on sale for $1.50. That probably is only a slight exaggeration. That thing has gone for about $15 in the last several sales. Ronald Dickinson, thanks for stopping by from sunny, and by sunny I mean rainy and crappy, Newark, Ohio. Richard Kerr, Kent Sherm, first foray into OCS Korea arrived this week. OCS Korea is actually a pretty good entry-level game for OCS, actually. It does get a little trickier into the campaign, but you can actually get started with it. You'll see a lot of the moving pieces in a relatively low-density environment. H-Tuna, welcome back. News from publisher in EU, Piacenza, 1746 from Europa Simulazioni. Always happy just to say Europa Simulazioni. Chuck Turner, thanks for stopping by. Try and get, let's see here. Trevor Smith, Russell Smith, thanks for stopping by. Okay, so next up, going to the printer in November. CDG Solo System, which is, we've talked about it before. It's a solo system for a bunch of different CDGs. Fall of Saigon, which is the Fire in the Lake expansion, which also contains the new solo bot. That's why I ordered it. Flashpoint South China Sea, that is Harold Buchanan's new game. That actually looks very promising. Great Battles of Julius Caesar Deluxe Edition, which I have ordered. I have not ordered Red Storm Baltic Approaches because I'm trying to save money. That's funny. Anyway, in the final art, at this point, Empire of the Sun 4th printing. I'm not sure what art's getting changed in Empire of the Sun 4th printing at that point. Rising Sun not yet arrived. I think it's safe to say that our order was probably the very last pre-order that was placed. It supposedly has shipped, so it may be showing up this week. And I'm completely okay with that. It's not like I don't have a entire friggin' box of ASL counters to punch and clip and organize. And then a bunch of stuff in the art department, nearing art department readiness. There's no huge shifts in any of this, so we're not going to bother talking about it. Thank you, GMT, for giving me a shout out amongst all these other fine people. Here's the cover of Banish the Snakes, which I got to say is a pretty striking cover and very un-GMT-like cover, but I think it will get attention. It's a nice cover. Here are maps for Banish All Their Fears. So this is the new Ben Hall and a co-designer system that will cover the War of the Austrian Succession and like the 9 Years' War, I think. It's got 2 battles in it, Nirvinden and Blenheim. I haven't pre-ordered that yet, and I'm not sure I'm going to, but I'm not sure I'm not. Red Storm Baltic Approaches, here's the box for that, looks nice. Here's more stuff for the Sci-Fi Red Dust Rebellion coin game. Mons 1914, I have pre-ordered this, very much looking forward to that. I saw the table pictures of Mr. President, which I was previously totally uninterested in, from the weekend at the warehouse, and having seen the sort of board layout, and it looks pretty neat, I gotta say. So that might be something that I investigate. Here's more. I mean, here it's huge. You can see that it's huge. I love huge. Huge is awesome. Here's a bunch of additional stuff. Let me give you your regular reminder that if you haven't done so already, I highly recommend that you pre-order Roads to Leningrad 2nd edition. Where is it on here? It has been languishing here. It's getting a little bit of attention, I think, in part due to me talking about it. This, along with Roads to Moscow, are terrific. They're really good, highly playable East Front operational games. Highly recommended by me. I do not have playthrough content of Roads to Leningrad, but Jeremy Antley does. So check that out if you want to see playthrough content, full playthrough series of Roads to Leningrad. It's a great video series, and the game is awesome. And I've played Roads to Moscow, and these are really good. So I highly recommend these. Please order them if you're in the market for anything remotely connected to this topic. All right, so next, what's going on? So we already talked about like the stuff that showed up here, which has been quite a bit, and Rising Sun probably be here this week, next week at worst. I also have 4 or 5 games from Revolution Games coming from Revolution Games. Those will probably show up in the next couple of days. They didn't make it today, unfortunately. And we'll talk about that stuff when it shows up. I'll be sure to mention it. I did see Dune, the new Denis Villeneuve Dune adaptation. It's really good. If you have any interest in seeing an adaptation of that book, or if you want to see the rest of that book, go see the movie either in theaters or go see it on HBO Now, or HBO Max, which is what I did. So I have a pretty decent. I mean, I watched it literally sitting here in front of the computer. But I have a big monitor and a high-res monitor and pretty good headphones, and I thought it was really good. So if you like the book, go see it. I'm also still watching Foundation on Apple TV. After a pretty strong episode 1 and a very strong episode 3, I think the show has kind of begun to spiral off in irrelevant directions. I am not writing it off yet, but I am feeling like it is super padded at this point. And I hope they can turn it around. So, because I'm paying for Apple TV, and I'd rather not just watch Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso is awesome, by the way, if you haven't watched Ted Lasso. Anyway, please do remember to like the video. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. It helps all the algorithm stuff. It is one way to help support the channel without, throwing actual dollars at me. And those ways are not less appreciated than the actual dollars. So, Doug Sunsets mentions that combining battles from the War of the Grand Alliance with the Austrian Succession would be odd. He'd expect the 7 Years' War to be combined with Austrian Succession. Maybe I misquoted that. That's plausible. But it's one of those, like, 1700s, a couple of those 1700s wars. Why is it a different rule set than Musket and Pike? That I'm not sure. I don't know enough about those conflicts to say. I have games on them. The very nice No Peace Without Spain system has games on both the War of the League of Augsburg, also known as the 9 Years' War, and the War of the Austrian Succession, which is the pragmatic war, right? It's the pragmatic. This is the Maria Theresa, Empress of Austria war. I have seen For All Mankind. It is also quite good. It is not as good as Ted Lasso, but it's better than Foundation so far. So anyway, I am not really willing to deal with theaters at this point, I gotta tell you. All right, so tonight's topic, we can actually start clipping counters now. Tonight's topic is playtesting, and as you may have already figured out, it is inspired by the fact that we have an entire event happening literally right now that is entirely, except for that one Great Battles of the American Civil War game, it is entirely OCS playtesting. So I thought I would talk a little bit about the standard playtesting model. I feel like a lot of people know this stuff already, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, and maybe I'll fill somebody in. So the way this model has historically worked in gaming, at least in an optimal experience, right, is that there's a designer, and the designer designs a game, and there's a developer who kind of helps. We got a counter separation problem here. And there's a developer who helps turn that design into a finished and polished game. And in some cases is responsible for coordinating the playtests as well. I'm going to speak to the... I'm not sure if they use this terminology or not, but you'll hear terms like alpha testing and beta testing, and what these things are supposed to mean. And both terms have been co-opted by the video game industry, and they are used to mean wildly different things. But the big distinction is supposed to be that the alpha test is an internal test, where it's the designer and the designer's group and the designer's buddies and people the designer knows is doing testing. And, that could look like the designer solitaire in it for, in some cases at least. And then there's beta testing where, again, in principle, yes, the Asimov Foundation. It is authorized by the Asimov estate. And Asimov's daughter is a producer or executive producer or something on the series. So the first episode, I think, is really pretty good and a very surprisingly direct adaptation. I could seriously talk about these two things all the entire night if I let myself get distracted by this. And like I said, worth watching. Very, very pretty show. Not written it off totally yet. We'll see what the whole series, the whole season looks like. So anyway. Beta testing is when you actually ship it out to people who the designer and or the developer do not have direct contact with. Okay? So it's like unsupervised testing. In video games, neither of these terms mean anything necessarily. It is a rarity when they are used in the same way that you would use them in the traditional board gaming model. In addition to that, there are some companies like Academy Games that don't really use the SPI designer developer development model. They go with more of a modern industry project management model. There's no reason that can't work, but I'm not sure what the playtesting process looks like in that environment either. So I'm guessing it happens because Academy has a reputation for putting out reasonably polished products, but I don't know what their process looks like. So, of course, how much testing you can do depends on the kind of game you're talking about, right? So, if it's a solitaire game, in many ways, that makes it super easy to playtest because you don't need to get multiple groups of players together. Everybody can playtest it solitaire. If it's a big multiplayer game, like a 6-player game that doesn't really work right, like Here I Stand that doesn't really work right at less than 6 players, then you can have some problems, right? Because it's harder to arrange 6 people around the same table on a regular basis. And the same thing applies to bigger games. Bigger games are harder to playtest. Some people, whose names I'm not going to mention again, have said that big monster games are never playtested, and that's horseshit. They absolutely can be. Certainly sometimes they're not. But dedicated folks, dedicated communities can get the playtesting done, especially in the context of the modern technological improvements like Vassal and stuff like that. It's easier to play and play test bigger games than before. Spud RPH says alpha and beta testing originated in computer software from the 1980s. Pretty sure they predate that, actually. I think you could be right about that terminology, though. I mean, the process like SPI, I don't think SPI did external playtesting really ever that I'm aware of. And as somebody mentioned here, War in the Pacific, the whoever was running the playtest for that, it might even have been Dunnigan, more or less admitted that they did playtest one of those scenarios multiple times, but they did not playtest the entire campaign. And the DG War in the Pacific, I have infamously gotten flamed by saying that I don't think it was playtested, and I don't think it was playtested. But the designer did say that they played a full game of it, but I don't know what that looked like, right? And he's not around to ask, so it certainly does not look like it was playtested. Let me put it that way. So Doug mentions that Frederick the Great is a huge innovator. Yes, that's absolutely true. And his father may have done some army reform, but Frederick the Great is the guy that gets the credit, because he's the guy who actually took it out on the battlefield and won a bunch of battles. He actually lost a bunch of battles too, but those are, if I'm not mistaken, 7 Years' War is after War of the it's linked up with the War of the Austrian Succession, isn't it? After the War of the Spanish Succession makes more sense. So, as Mike Anthony astutely... So, Vince Reese says the alpha beta terminology dates back to the 50s, which is, okay. This is how it's been applied to, at least to analog games. Computer games now, especially, a lot of these things will be like paid alphas and paid betas and stuff like that. So that's what I'm trying to say with that. Joe Perez says there's a difference between land miles and nautical miles. Well, yes, but the game should just use one of those two. So... anyway, as John Longshore mentions, the OCS games specifically are all, to some extent or another, even the small ones are a little bit monstery, right? But nevertheless, they are very thoroughly play-tested. Beyond the Rhine was play-tested for years. Not for years necessarily, intensely, right? Cross-channel Attack's getting pretty intense playtesting right now. And there's been continuous Vassal playtesting going on for at least the last 6 months, by the way. I participated in a little bit of that, then I got a job and I couldn't keep doing it. So, Fast Hines, welcome back to the channel. So, I feel like at some point I'll do a show on SPI soapboxes. I was actually in on eBay auction action today for no less than 5 SPI, I think it was 5 SPI soapbox games, and I didn't win any. Thank God I didn't win any of them. At some point I'll do an episode on those, because I think they're worth talking about. They're some of the best remembered, if not some of the most played SPI games, in part because they were big, right? One of the ones that I think has a lot to say, well, a couple of them did, right? Like, Campaign for North Africa has a lot to say about its topic. Now, whether you think that's worth the time or you think that what the message is worthwhile is a different story. But, like a game like Terrible Swift Sword. A better example is Operation Typhoon. Okay, Operation Typhoon is an enormously influential game, right? It's the first game that has that variable, as far as I'm aware, that variable strength chit pull mechanism, where units are basically untried and have unknown strength, and you pull a chit when they actually get into combat to determine how good they are. That system was turned into the Victory in the West system, which was used very successfully in a number of games by SPI, and which is still around today. There are variations on that, including the Case Blue Kharkov Battles thing from Compass, including Jaws of Victory from New England Simulations, including the variable combat system from Multi-Man, which I think is dead, but I think the next game got picked up somewhere. So that's a very influential game, but I think that its lessons have been thoroughly absorbed by other designers, other game systems. So I don't think playing Operation Typhoon today is necessarily going to be quite as valuable an experience as it would have been in 1978 or something like that, right? So let's look at. So I think I may have addressed the stream bandwidth instability problem. If anybody has any problems with buffering or stuttering or anything like that, let me know. And I have a new modem coming. So John Longshore mentions about Amelia Earhart and computing miles in the wrong miles. You think, I mean, and that's funny, but, you know, NASA did lose a Mars spacecraft because somebody ran calculations in U.S. measurements and then converted them to metric and made a mistake. So there is value in standardization, right? Of course, so one company who has become noteworthy, and we've certainly talked about it plenty around here, for not really aggressively playtesting things is Decision Games. But Doug Johnson is kind of trying to right that particular ship. Now, you know, I don't know that he's a miracle worker necessarily, but we have seen some signs that they're taking playtesting responsibilities a little bit more seriously. And that, you know, even includes the game, I think this was early 2020, or maybe 2020, I think it was early 2020, where our local group, actually did a round of playtesting for Decision. So, and we didn't like the game very much, but, you know, it was super early too, so who knows. So Doug mentions War of the Austrian succession is 1740 to 48, and the War of Jenkins' Ear is part of that. 7 Years' War is 1756 to 1763. So yeah, Frederick's around in both of them. So, but they're not quite back to back, but they're, you know, adjoining wars, if you will. So, don't quote me on which wars are being included there. So. Joe Perez says Grunyard also uses variable strength for its armored knights and tactical Napoleon games, but just a die roll for each unit in every combat. So I'm not sure if Joe's joking here or not, but normally I would expect there to be a die roll, right? There's variability built into the die roll. But you can always say that there's this, you know, all these intangible factors are built into the random die roll, right? Whereas and I think this comes up in Operation Typhoon, because it's an East Front game, and it happens during the period where the Soviets really start to be able to counterattack, at least to some extent, effectively. And there is a huge amount of variability between capability in Soviet units and formations. Some of those units, which sounded like they were going to be very effective, turned out to be garbage, and some of those units that nobody really thought were particularly noteworthy turned out to be Guards units later. If you don't know, the way that worked was if your unit, whatever it was, performed well enough in like actual fighting, then it got promoted to Guards status. Sometimes with a rename and sometimes not. And got higher on the priority list for things like replacements and equipment and stuff, you know, bullets and things like that. Tom Borman says he just purchased Just Now, Terrible Swift Sword, and Last Chance for Victory. So it sounds like not just now. I feel like, and I know that the people who like the Great Battles of the American Civil War system will agree with me. that the modern chit pull version of the system, I think, is better and more interesting than the old non-chit pull version of the system. There is almost certainly somebody that disagrees with that, but for my money, I'm happy with 3 Days of Gettysburg rather than trying to run down Terrible Swift Sword. Although, hilariously enough, Bloody April, the Shiloh Bloody April, was one of the soapboxes I was bidding on. It was also the one I put the least on. Thank God I didn't win any of those. I think I had... Oops, we got a... Ooh, shit. This is... We're going to have to grab the box for Balkan Front. This is a Balkan Front counter. I think it's German. Yeah, it certainly looks like it. Grab that in a minute. All right, where are we at here? A lot of units here. A lot of units. We'll go with these. More static divisions. So, Jeff is right. Jeff Beeler says that he thinks SPI was hurt by a lack of playtesting in the late 70s, especially games with unique systems. That's assuredly true. SPI did a lot of experimentation. And, you know, in the magazine games, when experimentation happened there, it wasn't that big a deal. Because, yeah, okay, so such and such a magazine game turned out to be an underbaked kind of dud. That happened, right? But at least you didn't pay $1 million for it, right? Where something like Campaign for North Africa was, you know, quite expensive even at the time, let alone what it goes for right now. So, and it is one of the, you know, one of those examples. So yeah, I can't argue with that. Avalon Hill was always better at playtesting than SPI was anyway, though, frankly. Not that Avalon Hill never had their playtesting hiccups, right? That certainly happened. But generally speaking, they were known for more playtesting. SPI was known for more experimentation. So, you know, you take the good with the bad, right? Avalon Hill was the company that used the same CRT for 15 or 20 years. So, regardless of the game's topic. They certainly did in-house playtesting. So, they being SPI. That is absolutely something that happened. But when you started to hit really big games, right, like your War in the Pacific, then you kind of have decided you're not going to be able to playtest this entire thing. War in the Pacific is, I think, maybe the best example, possibly alongside Campaign for North Africa, of an SPI, a big SPI game. Not all of which were soapboxes, but a lot of them were. That actually still does have some interesting things going on. Now, that's not to necessarily compare it in a favorable way to something like a Pacific War, but because I think Pacific War, I think the general consensus is going to be the Pacific War is the superior game in a lot of ways, maybe or maybe not including the campaign, but another, you know, that War in the Pacific campaign is another one of those things where if you mention it, you'll get disbelief that people actually played the whole thing. I actually don't doubt that that's the case. There's people that say they've played the whole campaign of Campaign for North Africa, and I have no reason to doubt them. Joe Perez says, the units in the Grunyard games do have a strength, but a die is rolled to determine if it suffers a slat modifier. So that makes it sound, makes it sound a little bit like maybe the surprise roll in OCS. But, you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth on that. And honestly, the Grunyard simulations thing is such a huge thing that I am resistant to getting into it. I do have the RS game, I think, and I do want to try the system because I think the system does look interesting. If I were to get into any of their game lines, it would be the Normandy thing, though. Fast Times. Which game promises more? Decisions Atlantic Wall or GMT's Battle for Normandy? I think they both promise about the same thing, but it really depends. I've played both. Battle for Normandy is about an order of magnitude or two simpler, right? It's not a simple game, but it's for a game of its size, it's pretty easy to deal with. Goss is a lot, right? And I'm not going to ever try to make the case that Goss is for everybody. It is frankly not for everybody. I enjoyed Goss a great deal. I would be delighted to play more Goss. I am hoping that at Winterfest this coming February, I will get to play Goss again. Goss or GTS. I mean, we might end up playing OCS. I don't know. But we play plenty of OCS around here. And I would just as soon play something different, right? I am super duper excited about the reprint of Pacific War and cannot wait to get it into my hands. So... Bob Kowalczyk. Yeah, Third World War is total. I mean, however you'd want to judge whether it's a monster or not. If you put all 4 games together, I think you're looking at a monster. The counter density, as Jeff Beeler points out, the counter density is not tremendously high. However, so it's not that much. It's not that burdensome to deal with, but it's still a big game that takes a while. So, it I think turns into a monster by any reasonable definition. Hey, I think First to Fight, is on the precipice of being a monster, and it's a 1-map game, right? So, it's said it's 1 map and 4 counter sheets, so it's not small. One of these days, I do want to do the Grognard system. But I have not. I just have not gotten around to it yet. So, I mean, if I guess I'm going to ask Heinz what exactly you're asking. If you want more detail, more ability to break down, more of everything, basically, then you want Goss. If you want something that's more on the playability side, while not being incredibly simplistic, then I think Battle for Normandy has a lot to offer. One of the big... So there are essentially 3 or 4 problems that I identified in playing Battle for Normandy. Some or all of these, for all I know, will be addressed by the 2nd edition, which is in preparation. Okay. One is that there's no mechanism for isolated units and how they're penal. Well, there is, but if units are cut off, I think they're halved all over the place. But you've still got to run them down, right? Now, it's a 3 turns per day type of thing, so maybe that's reasonable. I'd have preferred some kind of isolation mechanic. But again, you got to bear in mind the scale of the thing, too. There are 2 parallel supply systems in Battle for Normandy. One for the Germans, which is extremely simple, which is just trace stuff. And one for the Allies, which is a bit more involved, where you have this repository of points that you have to spend to do things like support attacks and fire artillery and things like that. I am not 100% convinced that system doesn't work, but I'm not convinced that it does. I felt like I broke it playing it. Let me put it that way. I'd really have to take another closer look at it to know. The sudden death June 12th victory conditions for the Allies in particular seem to me to be very easy to manage, barring, bearing in mind reasonably competent German play. It is absolutely key that the Germans hold Carentan through June 12th, or chances that they will suffer sudden death loss are really high. That's not the only sudden death victory condition, but it's the one that's the easiest for the Germans to hold that long. I have no idea what these units are. It's the unique Europa counter symbols. I've been a playtester. I imagine a lot of folks who have been in the hobby for a while. I haven't done that much playtesting, but I've done a little. have done playtesting here and there, even if it's just for a buddy's game, right? Charles Latorre has Hanut up next, or Anu, or however the hell you say it. Alan Salazar, if I was putting a wish list together on a dream game, so on like the topic, well, I mean there's a lot to ask there. I mean, is it? Are we talking about? I think I would want us to pick a topic that hasn't been done to death, right? I'm not going to make that dream game a bulge game, because there's a million treatments. I can find a suitable bulge game, right? I can find a suitable Normandy game, or a suitable East Front game, or whatever. So I would, but at the same time, if we're just dreaming, we might say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had the entire U.S. Civil War mapped out at 1 mile per hex, and we could play it all in Great Campaigns of the American Civil War. That sounds super duper impractical, but as long as we're, you know, pie in the sky dreaming anyway, maybe we could think about that. Or a really good operational Ancients system that covers like an Ancient World series, but frankly, I think you could design a cleaner version of that series nowadays, that covers things like the Gallic Wars and like the Mithridatic Wars and stuff like that. I think you could do a lot of cool stuff with that, and we have seen very little in that space. Wardrobe, thanks for stopping by. There is a coin playtest Discord. There is so many coin game, and I haven't looked at it in ages. There are so many coin games in development that I have lost track of them, and I think even Volko may have lost track of some of them. Goss is not as hard to play once you actually, you basically get it, and you don't have to look up that much stuff anymore, and you start playing it. Goss is not as complicated as you think it is. It's still a lot, right? It's still a complicated game. It's got a lot of interlocking systems that don't necessarily lend themselves well to a stripped down version like Hanut is supposed to be. But I mean, GCACW is kind of brigade level. I mean, it's kind of division, but there's plenty of brigades in there too. Krusty Captain has started Atlantic Wall. That's awesome. So yeah, just play it. I mean, just play it and figure it out as you go. Definitely use the new versions of the rules and the charts and all that from Lucky Forward, because those are a huge improvement over the old ones. Petric Pictures asks, what would I focus on first for an Ancients operational game? I mean, so we have a fair number of games on the Punic Wars, for example, specifically on the Second Punic War, and the Third Punic War is kind of a cakewalk for the Romans, so you don't really want to do a game for that. The Gallic Wars would be pretty interesting, actually. You could do like a 2-map game. I think that's operational Gallic Wars, and I think do something pretty interesting with it. I don't know that I'm the person that would do something particularly interesting with it. Fast Hines, thanks for stopping by. Jeff Bueller mentions Caesar in Gaul, so I'm confused as to which game you mean, or do you just mean that as a topic? Because I think you could do a cool topic out of it. But I mean, there's all kinds of cool operational topics that especially Ancients, because the ancient sources tended to concentrate on the battles and not on the maneuvers of the armies to get to the battles, right? I am super fascinated by ancient Mesopotamia, actually, which is one reason why I mentioned Chariots of Fire, and there's not that much in that space either. There is Chariots of Fire for Ancients. There's Phil Hetfield, thanks for stopping by. There's a handful of other games about battles in that time and place. And there's Genesis, which is the Richard Berg card-driven game, which I have and which actually looks interesting, but I have not had the chance to play it. Miss Nunez says he was disappointed Oh, okay. For some reason, I was reading your statement as meaning a time for trumpets, and I was like, wait a minute, that thing got play tested for years. Roman Civil War might make good operational games too. The trouble you end up with there is you end up with suddenly the Pompey's army relocates to Greece, and then you have to move to a separate map, right? So with the Civil War specifically, that happens several times. So Daniel Berger says Caesar's Gallic War 2nd edition in the Worthington Games pipeline soon. Caesar's Gallic War. Rise of Persia, that's an interesting topic that nobody's really dealt with. So there's that too. Let's check that. Because I'm not sure what game that is. Caesar's Gallic War. Oh, that's from Worthington. Yeah, okay, I've seen that. I'm not sure how operational, just looking at that, I'm not sure how operational that would feel. Phil Hetfield liked No Trumpets, No Drums. I know it's got its fans. I haven't played it. I don't know enough about it to say anything intelligent about it, so I'm not, other than that it's about Vietnam. So I think that's about as far as I'm getting with that particular topic. So, yeah, ancient Mesopotamia is fascinating. There's not, I mean, as you can imagine, there's not a lot of written records from that period. So, GRD, Busnonia mentions the First to Fight cover art, which you can see in the little screenshot there. GRD decided at some point that they were going to use, like, period propaganda posters for their covers, which in some cases work really well. The First to Fight cover specifically, I think, works really well. The Baltic Front cover, not so much. The trouble with this is people don't call it Balkan Front. They end up calling it Gladio. And I have to ask, what the hell are you talking about? And they mean Balkan Front. So, you know, it does say Balkan Front and kind of a weak orange up here, but it says Gladio much more prominently. So you got to be careful with that kind of stuff. But of the ones that I can, the Second Front one's pretty good. The Damn Die Hard is pretty good. But the best of those covers is First to Fight, in my opinion. Daniel Berger, I've actually seen the print and play version of that. That looks pretty interesting. It is, as I recall, a card-driven game. It looks like it takes an awful long time to play. So, we've got to grab our counter tray here. Just a second. This is the fancy Balkan Front counter tray. And I'm very happy with these, but unfortunately, those are actually Hungarians. But then I started looking at the order of battle for this and thinking, you know, the way this thing's written, it would be a lot easier to deal with if I used baggies. So we'll see if I stick with that for First to Fight. At this exact moment, my intention is to stop punching Europa after First to Fight. So, John Longshore mentions that Jason W. is quite right about the extant cuneiform records. A lot of them are super pedantic accounting type things, and not like histories, right? I mean, there's a reason we call Herodotus the father of history, and not some guy in Sumer, for example. Matt Taylor asks about, are there any double-blind board war games? Yeah, GDW did a whole series of them. Search for GDW double-blind series, and they will come up. In addition to that, There are a number of other games that sort of simulate being double blind. Flat Top is one of them. PQ17 from GMT, which I think is still available, is one of them. So there are examples. Greg Grant mentions the CRT of Battle for Normandy. I think he's right about that. There's also mandatory attacks in Battle for Normandy, which is not a mechanic I particularly care for. The CRT is weird because it's got kind of mixed up results to some extent. So if you have a positive DRM, that's usually good, but sometimes the DRM might land you on a higher result that is nevertheless worse than the lower die roll would have been. And a lot of people don't like that. And I am not here to argue with them. That is an interesting choice. I don't have a huge problem with it. It's not a make or break thing. But I think a bigger taste issue in that game to me is the mandatory attacks. Captain Sonar's sort of double blind too. That's true. I don't know that Captain Sonar is realistically a war game, but it's a hoot if you haven't played it. I think I've seen that Fall of Civilizations, actually. That is pretty good. Hopefully we'll be able to at least finish this one counter sheet tonight. Brian Mulvill asks about operational games on the campaigns of Germanicus. Not that I'm aware. Well, so somebody else mentioned, John Longshore mentioned Imperium Romanum. I think you may have one or two of those campaigns in Imperium Romanum 3. Or Imperium Romanum 2. Imperium Romanum 3 is the current one from Decision. It's a very nice game. It's got kind of all the same issues that the last version did, but it doesn't really have any new ones. And it adds a number of additional scenarios. And it's, the components are obviously of higher quality. Like way higher quality. So we've kind of drifted to block games here, and I would not call block games double blind games, but they are definitely games that contain hidden information. And the One True Phlegm mentions that Fields of Despair which is a very good game actually, from GMT. It's a block game, not double blind, but it has it's the traditional block system where you stand the blocks up and you can't see the factors on the other person's units. Are we really freezing? Seriously? I hope it's just on your side, because I've been dealing with. I do have a new modem coming. 6 Actual, thanks for stopping by. I might actually punch the damn die hard, to be honest, because it's pretty small. It's 3 counter sheets, one of which is all markers. I'm not sure I need the markers. But I am not going to, or at least I have no immediate plans to punch, for example. Can you see that stuff? I shuffled some stuff around. I guess you can't. I shuffled some stuff around. I have no immediate plans to punch Fire in the East. So, a lot of engineers. All right, very good. Thanks for checking that stuff for me. New England Simulations ILAO game. That should be coming pretty soon, spring of 22. I'm not sure I heard an actual date, but that sounds reasonable. That is based on the Wellington's Victory system. I am very curious to see how that's received, actually. So I switched to the other Wi-Fi network. There's 2 on our modem, so I switched to the other one, which generally gives better bandwidth anyway. Although on the upstream side, there's usually no difference. The Urals, there's no counters. At least I got no counters. So otherwise, I'm gonna be pissed. So one of the things that I bid on, and I think this went for about $169, which is a good price, by the way. So what we had was a punched, unverified War in the Pacific in the soapbox. This is the SPI War in the Pacific. Okay, Now I have it. However, my copy has two problems. One, that the box is in terrible condition. Two, it is missing one counter. It's a generic Japanese brigade. So what I would love to see is a parts copy of War in the Pacific come up with a beautiful soapbox, and a bag full of random counters. Doesn't have to be complete. But I was not willing to pay $169 for what might well have been a complete copy. Looked well taken care of. The box was nice. Jeff Beeler says Successors is an ancient operational game. I would make the same if you consider Successors to fall into that category, then I think you also have to consider things like Pax Romana and Sword of Rome and Hannibal Rome versus Carthage and Caesar Rome versus Gaul. And I think, not get Iggy critical, I think you're the problem, because nobody else is having a problem. But or I'm punishing you for not subscribing to the channel if you haven't subscribed to the channel. I have no idea. I can see the subscribers, but I can't keep track of 4,000 people. So, so if we're saying, I feel like those games are not really operational games. I feel like they have enough strategic flavor to them that I think they fall a little more on the strategic side. That's me. I mean, different people will tell you different things on that. I can see a case where something like Successors or any of those other things might be considered operational games, and they certainly have operational elements. One True Phlegm, SPI Wellington's Victory in the flat. I actually have the TSR Wellington's Victory, so I don't need a copy in the flat. If I saw a copy in the soapbox, which seems to be quite rare to me, I might grab it. Pacific War, I'm looking for the soapbox. So The Conquerors, that's a good point too. That's like a hybrid Rome versus and Greek thing. Actually, that's an interesting game, and that is operational. That's true. I won't need something that might get punched, but I have no need to punch it at this exact moment. Is War in the Desert, which is one of the things that we're playing now, and that does include the Near East stuff as well. Oh, this came too. This is a real Europa oddity. This is S&T number 128. I think this is during the 3W era, if I'm not mistaken. I think so, anyway. So this has a Europa-inspired game on the Italian campaigns in East Africa in it called Africa Oriental. And you can definitely see very Europa-esque counters. I got this pretty cheap. I think this was $25. The map looks like a Europa map. The game system, I mean, they say, hey, this is kind of based on Europa, so... Soapbox, War in the Pacific. War in the Pacific is, I feel like it's more common in the soapbox than it is in the flat. Don't think that means there's hard numbers on that. I don't know that there is, but I have seen Pacific War specifically. I have seen more Pacific Wars in the soapbox than I have in the flat. I have seen more War in Europe's, I think, in the flat than I have in the soapbox. But War in Europe is older, right? So, Campaign for North Africa, I think, was never released in a flat. I think the next war was never released in a flat. Conflicts in American History was never released in a flat, but that's a special case anyway. Oops, we got engineers here. That was not intended to be a flex, just so we have that out. I mean, I'll take it, but it was not intended to be a flex at first. So, Chuck Turner mentioned some of the OSG games. Somebody was talking about. Bis Nunez says he just dipped toes into the Library of Napoleonic Battles. Welcome aboard on that. What the hell are these? I don't know what these are either. And as Chuck points out, some of those battles are pretty big. So and some of the campaigns can be played as campaigns as opposed to just starting with the battles. So the best example remains Napoleon's Last Gamble, which is a couple of expansions that expand the map area. Tom Borman, I did a video on SPI Flats where I articulated all those exact issues. I am also not a fan of that format. It was kind of revolutionary packaging at the time, but at the time was like 1972. Jeff Beeler asks a really interesting question here. Has the number of unique wargame systems grown much since the 70s, or do publishers now focus more on a series of games using the same system like OCS? I am, without checking the numbers, I'll tell you what I believe to be the case. I think the number of unique wargame systems now, even if we count that only by, like, saying released in 2020 versus released in 1977, I think the number of unique wargame systems being released now is much higher. In addition to that, wargame systems don't go away, right? There's still people playing Panzergruppe Guderian, right? There's still people playing Panzerblitz. Not that many, but there's still people playing old stuff, right? Now, that said, and I believe, although I don't know that the concept of a series game originates with the gamers, it clearly doesn't. SPI did that in a number of cases. But I do think that the gamers, and Dean specifically, did more to sort of advance the cause and popularity of having game series with series rules and then game-specific rules and that kind of stuff than any other single figure, I think. And we definitely see a lot of that now. Even aside from that, I think there's still a lot more unique game systems now. The One True Flum, I suspect that both are a factor, that publishers find it appealing because they could sort of more easily create a product pipeline, where designers find it attractive because they can not redesign the system from scratch every single time. So, Mike Anthony is getting ready to play Panzergruppe Guderian. Awesome. GMT is known for certain series, but those series have always been a really small minority of their actual output. Maybe that's not true anymore. I do think that was true at one point, but I don't know that that's true anymore. But certainly there are a number of series that GMT is known for. And MMP, specifically the gamer side of MMP, but really kind of the whole company, kind of bases almost everything that they do around the series. And almost every publisher that I can think of has one of those series. So Hollenspiel, and to name the most sort of idiosyncratic wargame publisher I can think of, has the Horse and Musket series. I think that's what it's called, which they just revamped like completely and very effectively, I might add. Bill Bisnunya asked about the upcoming SCS Africa. No, I'd say not. Just a regular monster. Not a mini monster, a real monster, but just a monster and not a mega monster. So Jeff Beeler mentions, and I've heard about this, the most unique Europa game was the Spanish Civil War game printed in an issue of the Grenadier, which was to be used with the Spain and Portugal module, which is something that GDW did, but which was not really usable on its own at the time. And that was called No Parasan, I believe. And that was And I don't think that was redone so much as it was completely reimagined from the topic up in For Whom the Bell Tolls, which I do have. Bayonet Brant is in the house. Thanks for stopping by. Now there are, I mean, just looking at the stuff coming from GMT. I still have it up, so we can actually look at this. Hold on. All right. At the Warehouse, Absolute War is its own thing. MBT is kind of part of a series. Normandy 44 is kind of part of a series. Tank Duel is part of a series that wants to be a series. Wing Leader is a legit series already. 1848 is part of a series. Panzer is its own whole series. Wing Leader, again, part of a series. Here's the At the Printer, so give us a little more spread. Almoravid is part of a series. Battle Line is just Battle Line. Although there's a Battle Line Medieval too. I don't know if you want to call that a series. It's CNC Ancients is a series. Conquest and Consequences, well, it's going to have a companion game. I'm not sure if that qualifies as a series or not. Dominant Species is its own thing, but again, there's a companion game out now. Red Flag Over Paris, is that a coin game? I didn't think so. I think this is part of the Lunchtime series, which is not like a coherent series of games from a systems point of view. Bob Kowalczyk, I have done that stream, but I did that stream with Dan on Wednesday nights. Lynn Pratt is in the house. Thanks for stopping by. MMP Halloween Sale, we have already mentioned that. We'll look back to that too. So, again, Dominant Species, Red Flag Over Paris, Space Corp, which has got, it's a game plus expansions. Last 200 Yards is a series. Triumph and Tragedy, again, we've mentioned it. Twilight Struggle is its own thing, although there are Twilight Struggle spin-offs in the works, and certainly other games that have borrowed the system. So, I would have looking at this list, I would have a really hard time trying to claim that this is not a series-heavy schedule. Barbarossa Armor Group Center, part of a series. Into the Woods, part of a series. Pacific War is a standalone. Plains Indians War, as far as I know, is a standalone. Salerno 43, I don't consider those Simonich operational games to be a series so much as a family of sort of closely related games. U.S. Civil War is its own thing. Vietnam 65 to 75 is its own thing. Again, still a series-heavy approach. I did graduate. Let me change the camera back. I did graduate, which you may have noticed. Go back. Damn it. I keep doing that. Singapore over here. Second World War series from the... Now, I'm irritated at Stigler for not showing up because he's our in-house Great Battles of the American Civil War guru. And you could have asked him all your rules questions. So, I've been going through the Second World War, Singapore again. And I really do kind of want to like it. And I really I just get stopped dead on this mechanic, which is called CEV, or Combat Efficiency Value. And it is a multiplier to the factors on the counter. Okay, now, we've seen things like this before, right? And I think this is a really awkward mechanic at best. And then, okay, so refer to the CEV tables to determine what your CEV is, right? And your CEV for, say, Japan is different depending on when in the war you're talking about. It's different based on who you're fighting. It can have modifiers to it. So the CEV might be 2.6. So you would always multiply, in that same situation, the factors on the counter by 2.6 before computing the odds. And then this number is additionally used as basically a DRM that says, hey, if you got a hidden stack and you got recon units in the attacking stack, you get a plus 0.1 CEV. I'll be honest, I really just don't want to deal with that. That sounds like a giant pain in the dick, and I don't think that is a mechanic that I think is at the precipice of unplayability, being handled in that way. I think it is a bad mechanic to have in the game at all. But if it was like a flat thing where, hey, it's 1942, it's the Japanese, modify everything by 1.5, I'd be like, yeah, this is really clumsy and I don't like it, but I might be willing to overlook it. I cannot overlook it constantly fluctuating based on the situational DRMs. Anyway, and that is my stopping point for the Second World War series. Many other things about the series are very attractive. That is not one of them. Jeff Anderson. So, I mean, GMT's going to publish games that are going to make them money, right? So, you know, that they want to do a lot of coin games is not at all surprising. That they want to do these new lunchtime games is not at all surprising. They still do have plenty of war games in the pipeline. So, yeah, so the flat value is not my big problem with that, though. The big problem I hate, what the hell is this? It's like Airborne Engineers or something like that. The problem I have is with effectively making that a DRM, right? And saying for every combat roll you have to look and see what the exact number is. It's not like you just multiply it all by 1.5. I can understand the desire to not say, hey, it's 1942 now, we got to swap out all these counters. That you know, there are games that do that. Europa does that, and that is a pain, and it certainly does increase the number of counters that you need. But it's a game. I don't want to say game-breaking mechanic, because maybe it works fine, but it sure seems like a pain to play with. So, again, you know, plenty of hex and war games down to the groggiest forms of hex and counter stuff in the pipeline at GMT. So I'm not concerned about it. And you know, what if they want to do? You know, I don't want to call out anything specific that I'm just not interested in from GMT. But here, Absolute War. I'm not interested in that. I'm just not. So, Bandit Brant says Avalanche Press just announced a Panzer Grenadier Kursk game with 1,200 counters. So, is this different from their two previous Kursk Panzer Grenadier games? So, I'm not sure what's going on with that. The CEV rule is in Singapore, I can tell you that. So, and I see no reason to suspect, based on what I see in Singapore, that it is not in any of the other games. This is why I haven't done more video on Singapore, to be honest about it. It's a fascinating topic. It's a very ambitious product. A lot about it is very attractive. I every time I start looking at it, thinking, hey, I really want to do something with this, I stop on that rule and say, man, this blows. This is just a terrible rule. Okay, so Tim Zales, thanks, welcome to the stream, says that it's just both of those previous Kursk games together. So, by the way, I will remind everybody that if you have not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. Please thumbs up the video and all that stuff. I rarely harp on that stuff, but I specifically want to see somebody subscribe tonight so that I can see if the notification pops up, because I have notifications for that now. So, and it should be pretty cool when it happens. So, it looks like we topped out at about 90 today, and we probably won't beat that in the remaining half an hour. Peter Bergs, it's probably 1,200 counters for the whole thing. I mean, that's a big game, right? That's a big game, and I actually rather like Avalanche Press's counters traditionally. The most monstrous monster. Apparently, that video has done very well, by the way. So maybe we'll circle back to that topic of big monster games. Well, we'll circle back to that topic of big monster games. It's just a matter of when. The most notorious monster Fire is fire in the east plus Scorched Earth plus the Urals, but very few people got that far because usually the war is decided by the time. I mean, if you hit the Urals maps, it's really kind of over. Considering that even the Scorched Earth maps go way east of where the Germans actually made it, except in the south. So, this thing's been intermittently squeaking and annoying. This is a different clipper than I typically use. I decided at some point that I was going to clip the Europa stuff in 2.5mm. Achilles, thanks for stopping by. I mean, you can do Death Ride Kursk for... I mean, and that Death Ride Kursk has got more counters, more than 1,200 counters. I mean, that might have 12,000 counters. Peter Bergs mentions advanced ETO and advanced PTO, and I agree those would be pretty big, but they would not be any bigger than World in Flames with ships in flames and planes in flames. Just in terms of, you know, time and space and maps and counters and all that stuff. I've taken a reasonably closer. I haven't played it. I want to overplay this. I have done some looking into a ETO and a PTO because I thought they looked interesting at one point, and I decided that I was not going to deal with it because they're really bloated, and advanced ETO is out of print and goes for a giant pile of money, and I didn't want to deal with that either. I want to mention, back to SPI soapboxes very briefly, Wellington's victory in the soapbox. I have never physically seen a copy. Now, bear in mind, I went to Origins auctions all those years. I saw every single SPI soapbox that exists. I never saw that in a soapbox. I have seen it repeatedly in flats. It does exist in a soapbox. I have seen pictures of it, but I have never been in the same room as a copy of that. So, it may be that is the rarest one, but that might be conflicts in American history. So... CEV rule is that combat efficiency multiplier, like I was talking about. So the Decision War in the Pacific does have, that's a round number. It has around 9,000 counters, plus there's an expansion kit with another 2 or 4 counter sheets or something like that, because, you know, it wasn't big enough. Part of the reason for that is the necessity of having a million different levels of breakdowns because of the scales. One of the things that concerns me about, so we're talking about the Decision Games War in the Pacific. A couple of these things might apply to the SPI War in the Pacific, but generally speaking, I think the SPI War in the Pacific is huge but playable, challenging, but playable. The Decision War in the Pacific, I'm not convinced that it is. So one of the things it comes with, it's I believe a 7-map game to cover all the Pacific. Okay, that's India, all of Australia, the whole Pacific, all that stuff. Or at least the whole Eastern Pacific, or Western Pacific anyway. Up to, from Hawaii to you know, inland China. Navy Lander, Absolute Victory looks neat. The maps are ghastly, but the events-driven system looks really interesting. So, in addition to the 9 big maps in Decisions War in the Pacific, there are island maps. Now, the trouble with this is there's a map for every single island in the Pacific Ocean in the sort of war area, whether actual action took place on that island or not. Now, okay, so far so good. The problem gets to be that the Compass is having a sale. Did you not get the flyer? Everybody else got like 2 copies of the flyer. I was going to do a video on the flyer, but somebody else already did a video on the flyer. And their sale's been up on the website for a while. The problem with the island maps gets to be is that those islands are of vastly different sizes. Some of those islands are literal tiny uninhabited rocks in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and others are huge islands like Guadalcanal or Okinawa or even Iwo Jima. So the scales on the maps are all different, right? So what that means is that you have to have a completely telescoping scale from, you know, corps-sized units all the way down to, I think, battalions. And that's one reason why there's 9,000 counters in the game. I also, this is an aesthetic thing to say, so, bear that in mind when I say it. The maps, which I believe are Joe Youst maps, are gorgeous. I really love both the island maps, just the look of them, and the big ocean maps. They look great. The counters I do not like. I just don't like those counters. Why? They look like TSR counters. With a lot of extra color on them that I don't think actually adds to their utility. So I'm not a fan of the counters. And there's 9,000 of them. They are half-inch counters, right? They're not extra big counters or anything like that. So it's a lot of stuff. And don't think I haven't been tempted by that here. But to me, the interesting looking thing in SPI's Pacific War is that logistics and fleet maintenance system, which is a thing that was completely replaced in the Decision version. And it was replaced with that same system from Pacific War that nobody really likes as a thing in Pacific War. So it's like literally a worst of all possible worlds as far as Pacific monster games go. There's also the fact that it retails for $450 plus the expansion kit, which is another $40 or $50 or something like that. So, I mean, I can't argue with the price considering that it's 9 full-size maps, 1 million other maps and displays, all in a 3-inch box, and 9,000 counters. I mean, you're getting money out of it, but, I cannot in good conscience endorse buying that product at its price. It's doubtful that you'd get. So that's another thing I want to circle back to. And we've already had a discussion. We're way off the path of playtesting at this point. Is war game prices. You can. Let me think about that, John Keyports, because I think I possibly do need to answer that question. So. Just to get this out, Compass is having a sale. Prices are reflected on their website, plus they mailed the flyer out to anybody on their mailing list. MMP is having a sale starting on Friday at midnight, and which will run presumably midnight Eastern. I don't think they said that, but they're in Maryland, so I think it's probably Eastern. And it will run till Monday. And it will take the place of their typical Black Friday sale, which they don't anticipate being able to do because they anticipate being in the middle of shipping Hollow Legions by then. Okay, so there's 2 ways to look at wargame prices. One is gamers, not just wargamers, but gamers of all kinds, whine a lot about prices, okay? Video game prices have stayed relatively stable for the last 10 or 15 years, actually, at about $60 per game. There are some that are more, but generally speaking, they haven't gone up or too much. And if it's like a $40 new game, AAA game, you consider, like New World, you consider yourself lucky. Commands and Colors Tricorn I have, but I haven't actually done anything with it yet. But I like Commands and Colors a lot. So new series that I think brings a lot of innovation or is just really good. I'm really interested in seeing more from how do we define new? I mean, last 2 years, last 10 years. I'm really interested in seeing that Mons 19, that new Jeffrey Phipps Mons game, sister game to Gallipoli. I think that's got a lot of interesting things happening. Trying to remember what the box around the unit size symbol means. I'm not sure that it matters right now. So I'd like to see more with that. A lot of people are going to mention things like Last 100 Yards, which I've heard good things about, and I've heard good things about how innovative it is, but I haven't played it, so I can't comment on that. So, that's just, I'm going by strictly by reputation. All right, let's see where all this stuff's going, because I have no idea what some of these units even are. Yeah, so Peter, that's kind of where I'm going with that aborted thought, is that if you are just going to buy a war game and put it on the shelf, then you should absolutely be concerned about whether that war game costs $200 or not. If, on the other hand, you are going to play it, and not just intend to play it, but you actually do play it, even just once, even if it's not that big, then chances are pretty good you're going to end up doing pretty well on the entertainment dollars per hour scale. Okay. Games in general, analog games in general, are pretty good bargains if you look at them in terms of entertainment hours per dollar that you spent. You're going to end up with something like the movies is really high, actually. It's like $8 per hour that you spend at the movies, which is what movie tickets cost nowadays. Something like games might be $1 or $2, right? I put enough hours into Third Winter to justify the cost before the game came out, right? So, that was a total no-brainer for me. All right, I think we're done. No, I'm wrong. We're going to clip a few more here, but not much. Tom Borman, good question. Usually the answer is they don't, but the answer might be that they play tested it in pieces. Jeff Beeler, yeah, I mean, we have, I mean, I think that's self-evident. But it in no sense means that large games are not playtested. But it does mean that there are challenges to playtesting large games that don't exist when playtesting smaller games. Good point. Hopshed New Zealand points out very, very astutely that you can resell an analog game. Generally speaking, that's not the case with video games anymore. You bought them. You're the sole licensee. You cannot pass those along. Generally speaking, are there ways to do it? Probably. Depends on the game. I mean, any hobby that you get into can either be an expensive hobby or a cheap hobby, right? I'll be honest. If I was like the most hardcorest of the ASL guys, and I was, playing tons of ASL, and really, I mean, at that point, if you're that hardcore, you're just playing ASL, right? And I was buying every new thing that came out. And yeah, there's probably an item every couple of months if you count all the third-party stuff. But I'm still, if I'm playing like 10 hours a month, I'm still probably doing fine on a dollars per hour basis, right? And ASL is kind of the more, I mean, at least if, unless you don't, unless you stick with starter kit, or unless you like actively make the decision to not buy everything, it's a pretty expensive end of the wargaming hobby. It's been expensive for me, and I do not and will not buy ASL stuff on the secondary market because it's, in my opinion, it's overpriced. As a believer in capitalism, I am exercising my capitalistic privilege and saying I don't want to pay that, and I'm not. So, I mean, I could theoretically if I see something at a good price, but that's seldom the case with ASL stuff. So even if, for example, one great example of a really expensive product line is the Second World War games, right? The Diffraction Entertainment games that I spent 10 minutes complaining about. But if you don't have those problems with that and you enjoy those games and they cost $600, but you're playing them, then so what? It's cheaper than golfing. You pay $350 for a putter. I mean, and not to say nothing of what it costs per hour to actually go to the golf course, right? So I'm happy to buy the historical modules that Multiman puts out as they put them out. I am not running them down in the aftermarket. That ain't happening. They're too expensive. I will look it up on the chart. Thank you, Jeff. I'm a little surprised that there hasn't been more traction on games direct to Vassal, actually. And maybe that reason is obvious because it's difficult to monetize those games. That is very plausible. But, if... I'm still a little surprised that we haven't done some amateur stuff. I'll be honest, I have been very bad about listening to the Compass Games streams on Thursdays, because they're always on Thursdays, and it's just a bad night for me, generally speaking. I am happy to hear if he wants to redo Proud Monster. I think that game deserves to stay in print. Jeff Beeler says, compare the cost of the game to the cost of a reference book on the topic. So it's funny you should mention that. Somebody had one of those Normandy Atlases on the table at the OCS playtest event, and I looked it up because I'm like, oh, this looks cool. I'd like to buy this. And the book was $60. I mean, that's not cheap. I mean, you know, we're gonna have. I guess the takeaway is, and there's a huge caveat here when I say that I don't consider war games to be expensive. Even expensive war games I don't consider to be expensive. But the big caveat is if you play them. If you just buy it and stick it on a shelf, and then maybe you can recoup the cost on a resale later on. And I guess that's fine if that's your hobby. But buying games as a speculation is not what I want to particularly engage. That's not the hobby I want to be in, right? I'm not saying that's bad as such. I'm saying that is not a hobby I'm interested in. So, all right, we are done with the clipping. Where's the lid? For tonight. Before I pull my own face off, I've clipped about a sheet and a half here. So, oh dear. John Longshore paid $250 on a volume on the Westphalian Army, and it's in German. Damn it. So, yes, a lot of those military history books are really specialized. They're published at really specialized audiences of military historians, so the prices are really, really high. So bear that in mind. So, I consider golf to be far more boring than wargaming. I got to tell you, different people. If you have fun playing golf, good for you. But I no thanks. However, it is better exercise than a lot of people think. I don't think I've ever paid $120 for a book, technically. However, I will tell you that slipcase set for the RPG video that's not coming out tomorrow, that was $129, but that is technically 2 books, so in a slipcase. So let's talk about that upcoming stuff. And unfortunately, I don't have that much upcoming stuff actually lined up. Generally speaking, if I do not have the RPG Tuesday video done on Sunday, then it doesn't get done. And as of this very moment, it is in fact not done. So you probably won't see it till next week. It will be a flip through of the 2-volume guide to Glorantha set from Chaosium. Nathan Landrum, yes, the box is said to be a considerable part of the total cost of the whole thing. Wednesday, we will be streaming with Dan. That is on my channel this week. So tune in Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. We are still in daylight time. That doesn't go away till next month. So textbooks, I mean, the same deal, right? Textbooks are notoriously expensive. I kept a couple of my college textbooks, but I think I only kept like Latin and math. Why I kept them at physics. I kept physics too. I mean, if you... Again, I cannot claim to be free of the temptation to buy games, to have games to put on the shelves. The shelves behind me look so nice. That's a thing I try not to do, but let's face it, I just bought Deadly Northern Lights. So, but generally speaking, if you're buying them to play, or at least because you have a good chance to play them, right? We all have the shelf of shame, right? There's games that we didn't play, we didn't get to. It happens. Don't get too hung up about it. But if you pay $400 for a game, then damn it, I want to play that thing, right? Even if I never punch it and I end up playing it on Vassal, I'm going to buy that damn thing. So. Tom Borman says A Bridge Too Far cost him $6. So was that the SPI A Bridge Too Far, which I could well believe would go for $6, or the ASL A Bridge Too Far, which normally goes for upwards of $400 or $500? on the basis of it's got Black SS in it, pretty much. There is a reference value to war games. I can honestly say the only game I bought for that specific reason is It Never Snows. That is a game I probably won't ever play. But I wanted to have it for the map and Order of Battle reference work. So I can sympathize with that. Now, RPG stuff, I absolutely keep some of that stuff as references. That is the thing I totally do. Most of my RPG stuff's still in the storage unit, however. I mean, we're at least getting a lot of play in, so there's a good chance that I'll play at some point even the crazy stuff that I've bought lately, like Fire in the East. I'm probably not playing my copy, but I'll probably play it at some point. Peter Briggs, that sounds like a fascinating book that I'm glad I didn't take that class. So we got, let's see what we did. Looks like we maxed out at about 91 in the stream earlier. Yep, looks like that. And we're currently at 82, which is still really good. Once again, I'll remind folks to please do like the video. If you watch this thing on a regular basis, especially, really helps with the algorithm. The other thing that helps is commenting after the fact, but you won't be able to do that till the video goes up after the live stream. So feel free to do that. That helps the channel too. But definitely subscribe to the channel and like the video. And if you want to help support Ardwulf's Lair, I seldom mention this on the stream because I feel guilty about mentioning it. If you want to help support the stream, there are links to the Patreon, the merch store, and the Ko-Fi in the video description. We might turn on super chats at some point. That's supported by the thing I'm using for the chat notifications that haven't come up yet tonight. The West Point Atlas of the Napoleonic Wars. Really? I got that for Christmas. I mean, it's a paperback version. Maybe you got a fancier version or something like that. It's fantastic, by the way. That is a fantastic book. There's a West Point Atlas of the Civil War that I have as well that's also really good. And I don't think my mom paid $250 for it. I think it might have been $50 or $60. But I can easily imagine like older hardcover versions of that going for big money. That makes complete sense that they were later reprints. Another thing I should probably get, you saw the video on the unboxing video or unsleeving video on ASL Action Pack number 17, which is the one that's got like 18 scenarios, of which 15 are Korean War scenarios. I still don't have the Korean War module. I need to pick that up. If that is on sale during their sale, that's probably going to be my number one pick. It might not be. I don't know. But they do typically put some ASL stuff on sale. The stuff like the scenario packs, I have no friggin' idea what I have. For somebody who's as fastidious as I am about keeping track of the games, I've been very bad about keeping track of the ASL stuff. The miscellaneous scenario packs and stuff. The boxes I put in. So next week, I'm not sure what we're going to be clipping. So we will see. Might finish up Chandragupta. I'm not sure yet. I should definitely be finished. That reminds me. This is one of my scrap counter trays, where the lid and the bottom of the tray are at different generations, so they don't lock together. So I gotta rubber band them together because I am clumsy and will knock it over, and I don't want to do that. So might as well throw a rubber band on it just to be safe. GCACW, I'll tell you what, if it does go on sale, highly recommended. I highly recommend Roads to Gettysburg 2 at full price, let alone on discount. So multi-man's sales tend not to be absolutely everything is on sale. They tend to be a lot of stuff is on sale. So don't be surprised if GCACW does not go on sale. But check too, right? You'll see a lot of stuff from International Game Series and SCS and stuff like that. So, I will tell you this: you can get the Glance books in PDF periodically on sale for pretty cheap. Not PDF, but in Kindle format. I have a bunch of, like, the Stalingrad trilogy. I have those in Kindle format. The maps are not the strongest point in those books. I will tell you this, but I don't have the actual Atlas volume either. So, because what's the point in buying that in Kindle format, right? Peter Berg, yeah, that's my experience too. That's also true of Chandler. The campaigns of Napoleon maps are not great. That's why I wanted the West Point Atlas of the Napoleonic Wars to kind of go alongside Chandler. Because the book's great, the maps are not that good. There is an outstanding military history bookstore in Denver that we went to when we went out there. I don't remember what it's called. If Dave Minery is in the chat, which he probably is not, he might be able to mention it, or we might corner Dave on that later. But we went there and it's like, oh wow, this is like a wonderland of military history books. We don't have anything like that here. We had a pretty good independent bookstore called the Village Bookshop, which I really liked, but it went out of business. So, which wasn't military history exclusively, it just had a very good military history section. This other place, Bis Nunya, you're talking about the C4 corner cutter, which was a brace type plastic device that somebody was selling. A local gent has a copy, has one of those, and clipped a lot of counters with it, and doesn't do a great job. Aberdeen Books is the Denver bookstore I'm thinking of. Thank you, Peter. I do follow Tick. I don't get to watch his videos because he keeps doing, here's an 8-hour saga. Fuck, I can't watch that. So I don't get to watch all the videos, but I did watch one not that long ago, actually. I forget which one I watched. But it was very good. It's a very good channel, actually. I highly recommend the Glance books, but the maps are not their strong suit. So I mean, I used nail clippers for years, okay, and you can get good results with nail clippers, but in my opinion, if you clip with nail clippers, you really need to be very conservative, to make them look good. And it's very hard to stay completely consistent. So you'll be very conservative, and this counter looks good, and this counter looks good, and then you get this other one with 3 counters look good, and you've got this giant chunk taken out of the 4th corner, and it looks terrible. So, and then you try and overcompensate, and then you have a little stop sign, and it's bad. Yeah, not a fan of the C4 corner cutter. There's people that like it. Good for them. I'm glad they like it. I don't like it. I don't like the results that it produces. I strongly prefer the Oregon laminations tools, which have their own set of problems, right? But among those problems is not that they ruin your counters. So the fundamental issue with the C4 corner cutter is it's like a little brace, and you run a X-Acto knife down, and you can cut 4 or 5 counters at a time. You cut one corner off, then you rotate the whole stack, cut the next corner off, cut the next corner off. The trouble is it's all plastic. So you're even if you don't see plastic coming off with every stroke, you're shaving plastic off with every stroke. So you get bigger over time, you get bigger and bigger corner cuts, to the point where you get the little stop signs. If you've seen my Red Storm pictures, they're not my game, thank God. Those were clipped with the C4 corner cutter, and my God, the cutting on them is just so extreme. So, Black and Red, I didn't notice military books. I guess they did have military books there too. I spent my entire time there in their games area. where they did have a bunch of old war games too, SPI stuff and a variety of interesting other things. I actually picked up my copy of Chivalry and Sorcery there, second edition, my second copy of Chivalry and Sorcery. This is why I don't sell games anymore, right? Or sell my games unless I'm like making a very controlled call. I generally don't sell my games anymore. On that topic, I'm moving in the direction of getting the next sale wave going, and it's room clutter, once again, that you cannot see here. That is the reason why it has not yet occurred. But I do have motivation now, since I got some stuff out of the way. So you can make your own similar device to the C4 corner cutter with like a CD case, but it has the same problems. It wears away relatively quickly because it's plastic. It's not made for that, and you'll end up cutting off way more than you want. If I had to not use the Oregon Laminations cutters, I would go back to... I don't think you can get the C4 anymore either. I would go back to nail clippers before I would use the C4, to be honest. So the C4 people say it's faster because you can clip 4 or 5 counters at a time. Maybe as many as 10. I don't know. But you can clip, it's one corner, right? You're clipping one corner off of 10 counters. You rotate the stack, clip one corner off the other. So it's slower, but you might actually be able to get more counters done in the same amount of time. That's the case that is made, and that might be plausible, but if your counters look hideous, like hideously disfigured monstrosities at the end of the day, then I'm not sure that's a selling point. That it was fast is not the selling point. Kyle Reese says he's currently working on a corner clipping assistant for use with flathead nail clippers. Be curious to see that. It would have to be amazing to sell me on it, to be honest. So anyway, we are overtime slightly. I mean, I don't mind going overtime, but it's time. We got to work in the morning and all that stuff. So once again, I would like to remind folks to subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. There's an excellent chance that everybody here tonight is already subscribed. Do tune in to the stream with Dan on Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. There should be a video on Thursday, which is an unboxing video, and possibly a secondary unboxing video on Friday. We'll see if I get those things done. Not tomorrow. I think next week will be the RPG video. So we can't quite get as much done as I wanted, but busy at work too. So there's that. We've got a local guy who clips with, or did for years, clip with scissors. And at first you think, oh, really? You clip with scissors? How bad a job did you do? And they're really not that bad. They're not awesome, right? They're not Oregon Laminations quality corners, but they're not it's not as hideous a job of butchery as you would think. Anyway, we'll talk about more later next week. We'll be here next week at 8 p.m. Eastern. Still be daylight time next week. I might as well mention that the 50th corner clipping show is coming up in a couple of months, so we will have a giveaway when that happens. That's probably December. I got to actually go back and do a count. I've only missed one, and I know that, so I can just count weeks since the first one, but I haven't done that. I know it's coming up. I know the first one was in December of last year. So that's coming up. We will have a giveaway when that occurs. Thanks, everybody, for stopping by. Again, please do subscribe and like the video and all that.